Welcome to the 6th Stores and Stories event sponsored by the Historical Foundation of Hillsborough and Orange County. The Historical Foundation works to help support the museum, the Orange County Museum. We are especially grateful to the work of Kay Crawford and Brooks Braidner here. They are past members of our board, but they continue to do a heroic effort towards supporting our museum's mission, which is to preserve and interpret our county's history. So we thank them for this, and I know that I've learned so much more from the opportunity to have worked with them and continue to serve with them. So we're grateful for them. To introduce, Pat Rebels and I are co-chairing the Orange County Museum Board, so this is my co-chair, Pat Rebels. I'd also like to introduce any members here that are here from our board, present board. Please stand up and wave your hands. We want to see you. There you go. Okay, we've got a sort of a mini gift shop back there in the corner, and we encourage you to go back and see what we have for sale today. We have some beautiful journals, t-shirts, some CDs from past events. And if you didn't see the donation box when you came up the steps, we also greatly appreciate any amount that you might be able to spare to help support the museum. Also, I'd like you to know that our board members work hard. They do everything from, move furniture, put in new cabinets at the museum, keep up the facilities, bake cookies, yard sales, you name it, we'll get out there and do it. So we have a lot of committees in place, from facilities to exhibits to collections to marketing and education. We are always looking for individuals who are interested in joining our board, and also if you're not into just attending a meetings on a regular basis, then we'd love for you to come and serve on one of our committees. So please consider that as you enjoy our performance today. And also, I'm sure that if you have any ideas for future Stores and Stories events, Kay and Brooks would be glad to hear from you. So thank you for being here today. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. I'm glad you could come out and be with us today.
And I would just quickly echo what Susan has said, and we welcome you with much warmth and hospitality. And just as an aside as to how I have not only learned to appreciate the history of Orange County, as I have been able to be a volunteer on the foundation board, but more specifically, let me just ask, because I don't get to meet too many, how many of you are natives to Orange County? Wow, it's so good to see you, and I want you to know this woman, and Brooks too has been a soul brother, but this woman, Kay Williams Crawford, has been a real soul sister to me. In fact, do you all know the house at 329 West King Street that was the Williams house? That was her grandparents' house. And I happened to have the good fortune of purchasing that house when I moved to Hillsborough. And let me tell you, those walls do talk. About Kay's grandparents and about her brother Paul and about her, I think the man in her life, JoJo. But anyway, I just want you to know I've been very blessed by the history, not only of you natives, but others that have, like myself, come here to Hillsborough. So thank you on my behalf as well.
Welcome. I'm Brooks Braidner, and it's my privilege to work with my friend and colleague Kay Crawford on this Store and Stories event series. And it's been my particular privilege to work with a wonderful group of Orange County residents on today's program. This has truly been a collaborative effort. We've drawn from many sources, and I want here at the outset to thank Jerry Morris for his photography, Bill Crowther for his help with maps and diagrams, Joe Crawford and Jerry for filming, Marvin Tier for letting us use family photographs in his possession, and to the Durham Public Library for use of historic images of the farm. I also want to thank G. Coleman, Pat Cook, and K. Allison Fowler for their great input. Thank you all. Our program begins by telling the story of Occoneechee Farm from 1891 to 1923, and the story of its remarkable owner during that period, Julian Shakespeare Carr. The farm, as you will see, was much more than a farm, just as Julian Carr was much more than a farm owner. There was nothing like Occoneechee Farm in its heyday. People would travel by train and stop here at a special siding just to marvel at it. We will tell that part of the story in the words of a young man who was one of those who came to marvel in the mid-1890s. Then we will introduce you to the operation of the farm by bringing to life the pages of the farm journal in which Carr and his managers recorded their various expectations and accomplishments. The journal provides us with a fascinating glimpse into the sometimes humorous, sometimes painful tug of war between Carr and those he employed to actually manage the farm. Following a 7th-inning stretch, we'll tell the story of what happened to the farm after Carr was forced to sell it, its subsequent subdivision, and the dispersal of its remaining buildings. We'll tell that part of the story through the living memories of folk who actually grew up and around the farm. At the conclusion of the program, we invite you to look at the materials we have on exhibit and to ask questions of program participants. We'll answer as best we can. You can also leave here and take a tour of Carr's home in its current location on South Cameron Street here in Durham. I'm sorry. Its current location on South Cameron Street. Forget everything else I said. Yeah. Sorry about that. We're in Hillsborough. When we talk about, let's see if I can recover. When we talk about Occoneechee Farm, what exactly are we talking about? Where was it? How big was it? You can get a pretty good sense of that from this Google map. Let me point out, this is Highway, this is the Eno River, okay? And this is Highway 70, and this is New Highway 86, that's Interstate 85. So we're talking about a farm that extended to what's now the Walmart Home Depot property that includes Elizabeth Brady Road and everything on either side of Elizabeth Brady Road, and then everything pretty much on both sides of Highway 70, but especially the north side of Highway 70. Here is an aerial view from 1938 that shows the river again, shows the racetrack property, and shows the fields, and that's again Highway 70 down at the bottom. And here, if you're traveling along Highway 70A, this is the old entrance to the farm, as it shows in an early postcard view, and here's the way that same entrance looks today. And apart from the fact that it's missing some of the decorative finials on top of the, it's pretty much intact and looks very much the way it did back in the 1890s. Before Julian Carr purchased it in April of 1891, this property had been in the James Hogg family for almost a century. James Hogg, Scottish-born merchant and entrepreneur, had purchased 663 acres southeast of the town of Hillsborough in 1794, and he called it Banks of the Eno, which was fitting since the northern boundary of the property follows the Eno River. He built a house, named it Poplar Hill, and passed it on to his daughter, Robina Hogg Norwood, and her husband, who lived there throughout their lives. The Hogg family descendants sold it in 1891. Before banks of the Eno, and before the coming of white settlement in the 1750s, this property was the domain of Native Americans who hunted these woodlands and periodically settled near this bend of the Eno River. It was in recognition of these earliest occupants that Carr renamed the property Occoneechee Farm. Let's talk for a few minutes about Julian Carr. Most of what I know I have gleaned from Nina Webb's delightful biography, Jewel Carr, General Without an Army, published by UNC Press. And if you want to read more about him, I commend this book to you. Prior to 1891, Carr was not a farmer. He was a highly successful man of business and commerce who made and later lost a fortune in tobacco, textiles, and related enterprises. Carr was an Orange County native, born and raised in Chapel Hill, where his father was a merchant. As a young man, he went off to fight in the Civil War and was with Robert E. Lee at the time of Lee's surrender at Appomattox. Following the war, he and his father invested in the tobacco business that was just beginning to boom in Durham. Julian Carr is the man chiefly responsible for putting Bull Durham tobacco on the map. And you can see some of the wonderful advertisements related to Bull Durham here on this special table that Donna Freeland has set out. Julian Carr was the architect of the first national advertising campaign in America. As he put it, he wanted the nose of the Durham Bull in Canada and the tail in Mexico. Julian Carr thought big. The tobacco auction was another Carr brainchild. By 1891 then, Carr was already a very rich man and prominent North Carolina citizen. He sold his interest in the tobacco business in the 1890s for $3 million and began to invest in the emerging field of textiles instead. He built a lavish home in Durham named Somerset Villa, and he became known as a philanthropist. Among his most significant gifts was the property that became the site of Trinity College, later the East Campus of Duke University. There's some irony in this development, since Carr was a bitter rival of the Dukes in the tobacco business. But Carr did get his name permanently enshrined on the textile community adjacent to Chapel Hill, which was renamed Carborough in 1913 when he promised to install electricity throughout that community where some of his hosiery mills were located. Carr had a lively interest in politics and toyed with running for statewide office in the 1890s. Like many members of the white ruling elite, he was an outspoken advocate for Jim Crow, believing that society should be governed and controlled by whites, and that the practice of racial segregation should be enshrined in law. Sadly, violence and repression were among the tools used to establish and maintain the color line in North Carolina and elsewhere in the South, and Carr himself was not above resorting to such tactics on occasion. But within that racialized framework, Carr was often willing to behave paternalistically and to reward black leaders who were willing to comply with those constraints. Carr actively helped to support the strong financial and commercial institutions which made Durham the home of Black Wall Street, and he gave liberally to the establishment of Lincoln Hospital in Durham. And if you want to know more about that side of Carr's work, I commend to you Leslie Brown's book called Upbuilding Black Durham, Gender, Class, and Black Community Development in the Jim Crow South, which will tell you the story of Julian Carr's relationship to that work. Carr also looked back nostalgically on the Confederacy. He helped to establish and promote the cause of Confederate veterans, and it was in recognition of such support that he was accorded first the honorary rank of colonel and then general, though during the war itself he'd been a private. Late into his life, Carr loved nothing better than to parade in his Confederate outfit of his own design and decoration. It is scarcely surprising then that Occoneechee Farm under Julian Carr was the product of lots of money and his distinctive vision of what a farm could be. Carr did not intend Occoneechee Farm to be simply a part of his diversified holdings and economic investment, nor did he purchase it as a quiet retreat, a place to get away from the public eye. Rather, he wanted to draw the public eye, and he wanted folk to marvel at what he had created. Carr went into farming with the same larger-than-life swagger that he brought to his other enterprises. To that end, Carr began a massive building, development, and promotional plan for the farm. First, let's talk about the house. Carr was not content with the main house which the Hogs had built. He transformed it by addition and redecoration. He employed Greensboro designer Jewel Corner, who also worked locally on the Colonial Inn and Midlawn, to give the house an Italian makeover. Carr lived here principally in the summer because he continued to live in his Durham mansion most of the year. So you sometimes see Poplar Hill referred to as the summer cottage in descriptions of Occoneechee Farm. Carr also invested in barns and livestock. That's a 3-story barn. Here are photos which illustrate the grandeur of what Carr built. You can see that the place was known for its horses, for its barns, for its cattle. Carr made significant investments in livestock, in thoroughbred horses. He had a horse racetrack on the property. And one special note was the fact that the horse farm had a hand-painted sign for each horse in the horse farm, where on each sign was the name of the horse and its pedigree. Here's a picture of one of those signs, now in the possession of Bill Cheshire. Carr also kept exotic animals on the farm, including peacocks and monkeys. Carr also constructed a clubhouse next door to the manor house, or to the principal house, where he lived. And the purpose of this clubhouse was for entertainment and dancing, and you're going to hear more about that later in the program. Occoneechee Farm became famous in social circles for its parties. Now, just to give you a little better sense of the layout of the farm, it may be a little bit hard to see if you're sitting in the back, but this is the farm, and what I want you to be able to see is where all of the buildings are located over here on this part of the farm. And basically, when you went down the front drive, when you got to the end of the drive, there was Poplar Hill and the clubhouse. And as you drove into the center drive of the farm, most of the farm buildings were there on the right, clustered on the right. And then there are the fields and the racetracks surrounding that. And you can see there's a better view. That's the main drive. There's the house, there's the clubhouse, and here's that wonderful complex of barns and outbuildings. What all this indicates is that Carr's approach to farming was of piece with his other enterprises and in keeping with the behavior of the social and economic elite of the late 19th century. Occoneechee Farm was a sign that Carr had achieved the pinnacle of economic success, that his name could keep company with those of Carnegie, Roosevelt, and Vanderbilt. Within a few years of Carr taking possession of the farm, it became a tourist destination. Trains stopped at the Occoneechee Farm siding. This map is actually sort of upside down. That's the river. This is the farm and the house. And there was actually a special railroad siding so people could get off the train at the Occoneechee siding and go straight to the farm. One of the things I find interesting, and where's the mayor, is that this Occoneechee siding isn't all that far from the proposed new location of Hillsborough's farm siding. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting is that when you stop to think about it, Occoneechee Farm is in its way the beginning of Hillsborough as a tourist destination. We have a wonderful first-hand description of just such a visit, where a young man gets off the train and comes and tells you with amazement in his own words what it was like to visit Occoneechee Farm. So we're going to run that video now. It's a video of Frank Hunter, telling the story of his grandfather.
I'm Frank Hunter. My wife Millie and I moved to Hillsborough in July of 1979. When my aunt found out we were moving here, she gave me a letter that was in my grandfather Joseph Frederick Hunter's belongings. He had left Halifax County to attend North Carolina A&M College in Raleigh in about 1895. He wrote this letter to my future grandmother, Maddie, and told of his trip on a train with a college group to visit and study the Occoneechee Farm in Hillsborough. The letter is dated May 24, 1895. My dear Maddie, Freddie mentions the largest crowd in Raleigh he has ever seen. The city was just crammed from one end to the other. We, the military companies of the state and the A&M boys, marched 3 or 4 miles in the heat of the day. It was fearfully hot. Several men gave out before the march was over. I guess you've seen the papers, which can tell you more about it than I can. I went over to Peace Institute last Friday night, got back about 11:30, got up at 7 yesterday, went on an excursion yesterday, went to bed about 10 o'clock last night, and got up at 9:45 this morning. I haven't looked at a lesson for tomorrow. Professor Orby chartered a train and took about 100 of us up to Occoneechee Farm, owned by J.S. Carr near Hillsborough. We stopped at a pavilion on the edge of the farm and were carried out to the residence on wagons. There, about 800 acres of the farm. About 500 are in high state of cultivation. All of the crops are just as pretty as a picture. Right here I will mention the soil. It is red clay, very much like Warren County, but stickier. The house is covered with shingles down to the ground. In the yard is a log house called the clubhouse. It is built in a very artistic